People hardly hold that which is another man's as if it was their father's property. That was something I did, almost like took a pledge that I would be faithful in building that which is another man's. My blood, sweat, and tears went into building ACTB Savings and Loans, and I led the building of ACTB Savings and Loans from scratch, but most importantly, as if it was my father's business. You're going into a fresh industry, to something that you've never done before. Speak to those who have been there. Be a student before you can be a leader. Hire people who are better than you at what they do and get out of their way. So to grow something that is big, as a leader, you have to have the courage and security in yourself to hire somebody who's better than you. This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design. If you're meeting me for the first time, I'm Abass Bangura. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built at least 3 businesses that have each gone on to do between $500,000 to $1.5 million US turnover. And this channel is my way of sharing my lessons, my mistakes, my experiences, and everything I've learned in the process, so that you don't have to make my mistakes, but you could also have the platform to build the business that you've always desired. If you're observant, you would see there's something different about this guy that is there. And no, I'm not talking about my Sierra Leone, my Sierra Leone logo here. I'm talking about, you could see I'm sweating. Yes, there's obvious 1,000 things happening around me to stop this shoot from going on. And but the content I have to share is so powerful, it's so important that even the inconveniences that are going on around me cannot stop me sharing this. So please ignore the fact that I am sweat heavy as I do this, but my passion and desire to bring this message to you overcomes, like I said, surpasses every inconvenience that I'll face. So just ignore and focus on what I say. I am known for many things in Sierra Leone, and one of those things is the time I spent building ACTB Savings and Loans, a call to business. And it's interesting that the common story that you hear people say, it's Joe Abass now get a bank, now Joe Abass get a bank. And I have strenuously and continuously maybe used this opportunity to say again, I don't own the ACTB Savings and Loans. I didn't own ACTB Savings and Loans. And, ACTB Savings and Loans was founded by Paul Skiller, my mentor, great mentor. He's British, he's based in the UK. And one of the reasons why I think people would, interpret my owning the bank, or people will say I own the bank, is the vigor with which I built and led and protected that business. In an environment where people hardly hold that which is another man's as if it was their father's property. That was something I did, almost like took a pledge that I would be faithful in building that which is another man's. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why people will think nobody puts that level of devotion to building something that is not theirs. My blood, sweat, and tears went into building ACTB Savings and Loans, even though I had shares. I was given shares in the business, but I don't own ACTB Savings and Loans. But I built it, and I led the building of ACTB Savings and Loans from scratch, but most importantly, as if it was my father's business. But when I took over this assignment in June 2009, I had no background in the industry. I had my accounting qualification. I was a chartered accountant. I had worked with KPMG for 6 years. I'd worked with Audit Service for 5 years, and I worked with NACSA. And by then, I'd also started working with Africell for a period of maybe 4 or 5 years before I got this appointment to lead ACTB Savings and Loans, to lead the building of ACTB Savings and Loans. I understood balance sheet, I understood profit and loss account, but microfinance, no way. The only thing I knew at that point in time was I wanted to build something where my faith and my profession would mesh together. That's one of the reasons why I took up the assignment. I saw this advert that was put out, and it immediately clicked that it's something I'd like to be part of. This is a faith-based organization, a Christian organization that wants to do good in shaping lives. Some of you know me already. Some of you know that amongst other things, I'm a pastor. And then, I have a very strong religious foundation that guides and runs everything that I do. So I was thrilled with an assignment where practicing my faith on a day-to-day basis and my profession would go together. So that's excitement with which I took up this assignment. And what happened over the next 9 years changed everything I believed about business. And today I'd like to share 5 lessons I learned during this process. There may be more, and maybe there may be a part 2 of another set of 5 lessons I learned in leading the building of ACTB Savings and Loans, but 5 lessons, not theory, things I lived every day, every moment of my life to build what is now ACTB Savings and Loans. And what's lesson number 1? You have to be a student before you get to be a leader. So what does this mean? The moment I took over the assignment, I knew I had to go back to school. A student before you're a leader. I had to go back to school. And so it was just a fundamental basis of something I'd already learned, that the way to go into any industry is to find the experts, people who've already done what you're trying to do, and get mentorship, get time to spend with them. So I asked around, and I was introduced to the 4 major microfinance organizations that existed then in 2009. I was introduced to those MDs, and I think I didn't know any of them. I just got names of their companies. I got telephone numbers that were given to me, and I logged on those telephone numbers, and I booked a call, and I booked appointment to meet with each of those 4 managing directors in those microfinance businesses. You say, be a student before you can be a leader. So I went to their offices with a book in my hand and a pen ready to go. And it's funny, I was going to come to this podcast with a sheet of paper that I, on the notes I made back in 2009, but would save that for another day. But I took a notebook, I took a pen, and I booked those appointments, walked to their offices, and asked them all the questions that would be relevant of all the stuff they had done. Some of them had been running the microfinance businesses for maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. And here was I coming in the industry afresh. What do? Is learn from them. Be a student before you can be a leader. Booked the appointment, went to the offices, sat down, and had a chat with them. What's your biggest lessons that you've learned being a leader of these businesses? Where are the biggest risks in this business? What keeps you up at night? What are the things I should avoid the most that has the potential risk to destroy this business? As they spoke, I took notes. I learned from the feet of those who have been before me. And in one of those meetings, I took out a managing director for dinner. It wasn't in their office, it was for dinner. And I sat there. I could still vividly remember it was one of those beach houses that we had. And that's where we went for dinner. I paid for the dinner. And it wasn't about the food. It was about me learning. And this person was actually Nigerian, a managing director for a farm, a Nigerian company that was here. And I learned from his feet. I took copious notes that I have up till today, learning from them, same questions. And the final visit I made in this my adventures that I went, my learning adventure, led me to ARD Association for Rural Development. My mentor, Kanja Sise, Alaji, introduced me to Mr. Alifona, who was then the managing director for ARD Association for Rural Development. And I booked this appointment, went there one evening. The office was at Liverpool Street. And I had a chat with Alifona, Mr. Alifona. I was meeting him for the first time. Thank goodness for mentors. He says, what happens, mentors? You don't only get knowledge for them, but you get access to their networks. So as I sat down with Mr. Fona and I introduced myself to him and I told him the reason I was there, then he said, there's somebody I think you need to talk to. He took me outside his office. He says, I don't think I should be the one you talk to. Took me outside the office, and then we went straight, like we're going out to the stairs, and then we turned right. There was a small office there, and somebody was seated there, and that's how I met David Kamara for the first time, Liverpool Street. Alifona introduced me to David Kamara. As we chat together, I knew this is the kind of person I needed to help me build the microfinance business. So we had very fruitful discussions with David. David made a lot of suggestions on the kind of software we should use, the management information system we should use. David ended up helping me recruit my first finance manager, my first operations manager, and set up all the systems. We actually gave David a consultancy, contract to say, help me set up the business. Incidentally, no sooner I took up this job than I had the scholarship from the US government. I had to spend a year in Syracuse. But David helped me set up the microfinance business. And I went away to Syracuse University, and everything that happened in the back, David was helping me, receiving the reports every month, analyzing those reports, and every other thing that had to happen. I learned from those who have been in the business before me. That's how I was able to grow ACTB Savings and Loans to what it became by the time I was stepping down. And even now, it's growing humongously every day. Lesson number 1 I learned: you're going into a fresh industry, to something that you've never done before. Speak to those who have been there. Be a student before you can be a leader. Be a student. And it takes a lot of humility to now go to people who are, some of them were older than me, but some I was older than, but to sit in front of somebody who they are experts at this, and learn from them. It takes a lot of humility. Lesson I learned, one big lesson that helped me build a ACTB Savings Loan, was the humility to learn and to be a student before I could lead. Lesson number 2, to grow a business exponentially like we did with ACTB Savings and Loan. Lesson number 2, hire people who are better than you at what they do and get out of their way. Hire people who are better than you at what they do and stay out of their way. So again, this is a continuation of the story and journey with David Kamar. So once we went through this initial phase of David being a consultant and help me handhold the team, build the business in my absence whilst I was in the US. By the time I came back, I came back in 2010, mid 2010, June, July 2010. That's when I came back from the US. As we walked, I begin to realize again, just the instincts that I have, that it wasn't just to bring David in as a consultant, but how do you to build this business? It takes you having somebody who's the expert at it, leading the business, not from outside as a consultant. And sometimes consultants do not have a lot of stake in the business. They don't have a skin in the game. And so I've had somebody says consultants take your watch to tell you the time, so they will use your watch to tell you the time. But so I wanted, I thought we should take this relationship to the next level, beyond dating, to really very good relationship in a marriage, as in a marriage, as to David coming and working full time. So that became my next agenda to work on, to make sure we could get David to work with us on a full-time basis. But there was a catch. David has just been promoted to the position of executive director in the office that he was working with. He was no longer at ARD. He had left for another organization, a microfinance business, and he'd just been promoted to executive director. And how can you get promoted and in a space of 3 months after your promotion you say you're leaving? Being the professional that he is, and he said that was a catch. So it's me and my dinners. It was actually out at a dinner at the Hub Hotel. Used to be Mamba Point then, but that's where we sat down and said, okay, that's a big catch, that I have just taken this assignment, and the new promotion that I got, I don't think it will be professional for me to leave the business. Then I said, fine, being the entrepreneur that I was growing into, I read a lot of books, I read a lot of materials. I said, fine, David, no problem. I'll get back to you on this. But keep this in my mind. I'd like for you to work with us at ACTB Savings and Loans. I believe that the two of us working together can build something that could be so unbelievable in the country. Again, my pitch, I'm a salesman. So I did my sales pitch to David. We went away, and after a few weeks, I got this material that I was reading about leadership. You have to do it all the time. You want to be a leader, you have to be reading leadership materials. Access them wherever they are, wherever you can find them. I sleep and wake, breathing in materials, taking in materials on leadership, and every topic that mattered to me, I would spend my time. So in one of these readings, I came across a situation where somebody wanted to employ, someone in a business, and the guy gave a similar excuse, or was in a similar situation as David. They've just taken up this job. There's no way they can, leave what they were working on at the moment. And then he was asked, how long would you need to plot out a transition? And then the guy then in the material that I was reading said, okay, I would need about a year. You reckon that's all I needed? And so I came back to book a second appointment with David. At the same number point, I said, you know what if in your heart of hearts you really think it makes sense for you to join us, not just in the space of time that is required? How long would it take? How long would you want us to give you that you could plan a very solid transition? You could recruit a replacement for yourself, mentor the replacement, making sure they are stable and solid, so you could seamlessly ease yourself out of this role. But what time was I talking to David? It was in April 2011, and David said to me, I would need till the rest of the year, and so we can get a deal for me to join ACTB Microfinance on 1st of January 2012. We signed the contract 9 months ahead of time so that we can get David work with us at ACTB Savings and Loans. Second lesson I learned in building ACTB: look for the most competent staff, people who are better than you at what they do, at what is required, and then get out of their way. So with Resilient, we made this offer to David, and incidentally, things worked out so well that David actually joined us 1st of November 2011 and not 1st January 2012, given how smooth the transition went. David was the right person to build the company, not me. I was the leader, but in terms of driving that thing, you needed somebody who was the expert. So to grow something that is bigger dream, you shouldn't hesitate. You shouldn't back away as a leader. You shouldn't shy away. And sometimes our leaders were not very comfortable with being in a room where, particularly with the people we work with or the people we lead, and having them knowing more than you know. That is 18th century leadership. 21st century leadership. In this age that we are now in, the best leaders are the ones who would assemble the best team around them. The best team of people who know everything about the expertise in the various departments and segments that they occupy and the roles that they play. That would be the best leader. So you're not insecure, you're okay with that, and still able to lead them. And that's a big point, because they may be the expert at what they do, but when it comes to leadership, it's a different animal altogether. You're still able to provide leadership for them. That's what makes you leader. So that's the second big lesson that I learned. Waited, locked in David 9 months beforehand, because there was no hesitation in me recruiting somebody who was better than me at what was needed in the business at that point in time, and then got out of his way. Lesson number 3 I learned in building ACTB Savings and Loans was be accountable to your team, not just to your board. In those days with ACTB Savings and Loans, when we would give out loans, the loans that we gave out was predominantly to people who sell products, not services. And so when the loan officers would go out to do their assessments, to evaluate loan applications, they would look at your shop, do the inventory count, and just check the volume of inventory that you had. And in fact, the inventory value became a reference point of the size of the loan that you're going to be given. One of the reference points of the size of the loan that you're going to be given at the end of the day. Here was I, for the first time ever, now had to approve a loan to a building contractor who had just won a contract. He had a copy of the letter to show that the contract had been awarded to you. This is the volume. This is the size of the contract. What you're going to be paid in executing this. And this guy wanted to fund the execution of this contract. So I did all the work that was needed at that point in time. I'm not even sure whether we had a full-fledged loan approval committee. Very, very early days at that point in time, a full-fledged loan approval committee. So we got this guy, and I did the approval, made the minutes in the file, and then, once the file got to the internal auditor, Churchill, Mustafa Churchill Pratt, very brave guy, he gave me a call and to express a concern that he'd had, that he noticed that we were given this the loan that we had approved. There are no inventory, there's nothing the guy would show to demonstrate the basis on which the loan was approved. Now, obviously, the first thing that would come in the mind of a leader, my blood really just run up my brain. How dare he ask me? I am the managing director, he's the internal auditor. How dare he challenge my decision, the decision that I had made? But again, the leader, again, I'm telling you, a level 5 leader, we'll talk about a level 5 leader just now, but a level 5 leader is also accountable to their team. So I spent about 5-7 minutes over the phone to explain to him the basis of the decision that I had made. Okay, this is the first time we're given this kind of loan, so you don't need an inventory. There's a historical cash flows they've had that is shown by bank statements that that is shown of what they've been dealing, what their cash inflows and outflows have been like over the last 6 months, 6 to 12 months. You would see it. So the statement was there. Number 2, there's evidence of future cash flow, potential future cash flow, which is the basis of this contract that they now have. It gives you the volume of the contract that has been awarded. And so, this is the revenue that's supposed to be coming in as a result of this contract. The third was collateral. He had provided his collateral. So a historical cash flow, future cash flow, and a collateral was all 3 that I put together to make the decision to give the approval. That's what I said to him over the phone. But this had not been properly documented in the file. So the moment he dropped off the phone, I made sure this was documented in the file. Very early days of ACTB Savings Loans, documented in the file. And I said, send to him an email. I said, print this, put it in the file in case somebody asks the basis of this decision in the future. This is the reason you would give as to why we did that. You would agree with me that it's an interesting moment. Maybe a test of real leadership. A test of real leadership. Obviously, the way he did it, he approached me with respect. That was his role. That was his position in the office. And I would imagine, the way we have leadership in these days where, 90% of the time, that guy would not exist in that business. It would disappear in a month. That's what would normally happen. Anyway, my experience and my lessons that I learned, ACTB Savings Loans is one of the biggest microfinance businesses in the country. One of the reasons, part of what I learned, that we'll be able to build to the level that we did before I was stepping down, build the foundation, solid foundation will build is accountability. You're accountable not just to your board, but you're also accountable to your team. Your team have to know the basis of decisions you're making. You have to take your entire management team along with you. There has to be transparent leadership, transparent management. So Churchill is there. He's still now, as I talk to you, 2026. He's still in the business. The last time I checked, he's still in the business as I'm sure he's playing the same role in audit and internal audit. Nothing affected his position for questioning me. The basis of my decision, it was my responsibility as a leader to transparently be accountable to my team and say, this is the basis of this decision. Print, put in file in case somebody asks about that in future. Lesson number 4. The right hire is never too expensive. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? What does that mean? in my Form 3 French. Now again, it's the third lesson. A lot of lessons are built around David Kamar. The first one about me being a student. The second one about me being not being afraid to recruit somebody who was more vast at the topic, was an expert who was more competent than I was. And again, lesson number 4 is about David. One of the biggest challenges we had in recruiting David was we knew it was going to be expensive. We looked at the payroll at that point in time, what the higher staff was being paid, and David would just break our payroll. He would just break our payroll. It was a concern that I had. Thank God for mentors. So I had this because actually, so once we started this discussion with David around, even with the timing, giving him, a contract ahead of time, the next thing, once you say, yes, I agree, was to decide on, what are we going to pay David? So I called the chairman, my mentor, Paul Skiller, and we had this discussion, and I expressed my concern about the cost, what it was going to cost David. Paul came back to me and said, the first question he asked me, Joe, are you confident that David is the right person for this job? Yes. Are you confident that David would deliver on this job? I said yes. I was confident. I've worked with David then for more than 2 years. For more than 2 years, or about more than 2 years. That's when I'd worked with David, and he said yes. I said yes, I'm sure David is the right person. Then he said this to me, Joe, if you're confident that David is the right person, he will more than cover his costs. He will generate revenues that are going to be much, much more than his cost in multiples, if you're sure he's the right person. That one statement that Paul made to me opened my eyes to the way business is run. You bring somebody in, the person costs $3,000-$4,000. It's expensive. It will shatter your payroll, pay scale and all. Forget about the politics of what's going to happen to what existed already, because listen to me, it's leaders building leadership, building businesses. It's leadership, it's people, and having the right person. Just quite recently, in the last few days, you had the story about Elon Musk telling the board in the companies in SpaceX and that he was going to build a $10 trillion company. And so if he does that, he should be paid $1 trillion. Nobody else could do that but Elon Musk. That's how powerful leaders can be. Nobody can do that. And by the time you know it, an IPO was raised, and with the valuation, Elon Musk is now worth $1 trillion. The first time ever anybody could do that. But it's actually down to Elon himself. So that was something I had to learn, in a very hard way, that it's really about the people. People who are the best at what they do can more than pay for themselves. And that lesson that I learned was very, very helpful for me, very, very useful, and it's something I carry to this day. Within a space of 6 months, the business was stabilized. By the time it got to 12 months, you could actually forget that there was this big jump in the payroll costs. Because the revenues in 6 to 12 months, the revenues begin to show. We began to see the effect in the revenues, the stabilization, the strategy, the processes, and everything that was brought into this business. It began to show. David more than paid for himself. Like Elon Musk could more than pay for $1 trillion that was going to be given to him because he can build a business that is $10 trillion. He was given $1 trillion. In exchange for that. And for small entrepreneurs who are coming up, what do you do? Give somebody shares in the business, because sometimes the revenue that your business generates is not enough to attract the caliber of people you need in your business. Give them a share of your business. 20%, 30%. What is it that they're going to bring in? If they're going to play a significant role in driving your small business, you're better off being a 60% of a business that does 10 times what it is now than be 100% shareholder in a business that does only PET. You might think of offering them shares to join you. Give them equity in your business, because the right hire is never too expensive. And the final lessons in this lesson of 5 things I learned building ACTB Savings and Loans, it again has to do with humility. And it says, never let your ego be bigger than the mission. I can't tell you the number of businesses, marriages, relationships that ego has destroyed. And what's ego? It's just the sense of how much value we have that is bloated, to the extent that people wouldn't mind destroy a business, because them being hurt is much more painful than destroying a business that would affect the lives of tens of staff and have greater, bigger implications. So you have people say, well, we go born now, we go poor now, because it's ego that is at play. Once egos begin to fight, I've seen it all the time in offices, in businesses. Once egos are let off like pack of wolves, they destroy everything. Something that would have taken years to build is destroyed one day through ego. A leader whose ego becomes bigger than the mission will dismantle everything they had built. We could go back to the story of Churchill. This is my internal auditor. He would come and question, how come I approved the loan that I did? Now, ego tells me this is stupid, this is silly, it's not supposed to be questioning my authority, but a mission-driven leader now knows this is an opportunity to demonstrate accountability to the team. It took me, maybe a few seconds to realize this. It was less than a minute to get to the point where my blood pressure was up my head and to realize, leader, the leader in you must stand out, because if your ego becomes bigger than the mission, you destroy and dismantle everything that you have built. Jim Collins wrote a book, Good to Great. In the book, Good to Great, Jim Collins identified what he called a level 5 leader. Somebody who has the paradoxical blend of professional will mixed with humility. And a combination of that, he says, it's the leader gets to the point in time where the mission becomes so important in their eyes that they subject their ego to the mission. If somebody offends them and if they react, it will destroy the mission. It will destroy the key objectives they have of the organization. They would rather somebody take advantage of them so that it would protect this big mission. Leader, you're going to be offended. You're a government minister, you're a permanent secretary, you're an entrepreneur, whatever you're building, you're going to be offended. I have been offended tens and thousands of times. I would continue to be offended. As long as you're dealing with human beings, you're going to be offended. But it's a decision you have to make at the end of the day. Ego versus the mission, which is bigger? If this was just all about you, you'd say, let's burn the place. But if it was never about you, and this is why you have leaders who, what they've achieved would live long after they've gone, because life was never about them. It was never about their ego. It was about what they were building. I can't stand here to begin to even tell you the stories of how things have been done, even from the entrepreneurial journey. Things are done to you where you think this is so unfair, and I think I should not let this go. I should react to the extent that you would destroy what you have built. What's been taken years to build, you say, okay, let's destroy this. Where does it take you? Never let your ego be bigger than the mission. Never. Don't do it. If you are a leader who would lay things down where years after you've gone, you build foundations that would remain after you're gone, it cannot be about you. Astute professional will, you want to get this done, you're a go-getter, you're pushing. But once your ego stands in the way of the execution of your goals, humility now steps in and you say, no, I'd rather be offended and let this mission go ahead. I'd rather be offended so that it goes ahead. If you do that, it's a tough thing to say. It's a tough thing for you to have to do. But again, that's my lessons. And then, I have lots and lots of explanations to break that one down, even with the ACTB story. But I'm so proud of what has been achieved there. I'm so proud of what's the growth that has taken place in the company. To the extent that when I was stepping down, by the time I was stepping down, we had gotten a license from the central bank for it to operate as a deposit-taking microfinance bank. Never let your ego be bigger than the mission. So in a marriage home, it's the same thing. It's everywhere. Never let your ego. I'd rather say sorry to my wife. I'd rather say sorry to my children. I'd rather say sorry to my kids. If the marriage, your ego cannot be bigger than the relationship that you have. So in summary, 5 things that I've learned in the journey of building ACTB Savings Loans. 5 things I learned in the process. Be a student before you be a leader. Number 2, hire people who are better than you and then get out of their way. Number 3, be accountable to your team, not just to your board. Number 4, the right hire is never too expensive. And number 5, never let your ego become bigger than the mission. And so amongst the things then we'll round up in today's show is to just know that if you're building a business as an entrepreneur, there's no doubt that these lessons that I have learned in building a multi-million-dollar business would also be helpful to you, for you to keep in your head, to drive as your journey as you go on as an entrepreneur. But don't forget, Startup Body Shop, one of the sponsors of this show, Startup Body Shop, draws your attention that at any point in time, one of the things that will be limiting your business is constraints. And there may be a few constraints limiting the growth of your business, and sometimes there's one that is most responsible for holding you back. There are few constraints responsible for holding you back at your business, but then sometimes there's only one. And if you spend time identifying that constraint and take your time to work on the constraint in the business, work on that specific constraint, you could unleash your business to growth that you wouldn't imagine possible. So take the diagnostics, go to startupbodyshop.com/diagnostics and take the diagnostics. Test your business. In 15 minutes, you would find out what is holding back the growth of your business, and you can begin to work on the constraint in your business. And on behalf of our sponsors, AfriCell, AfriMoney, RC Bank, Sierra Tel, and the Startup Body Shop, I'm Joe Abass, rounding up again with the only belief that matters. If you think you can, because your behaviors would follow your beliefs. If you think you can't, you won't, because your behaviors will follow your beliefs. Until we meet again, keep designing, keep shaping, keep creating, because this is a life that you can shape. It's a life that you can design. God bless.
This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design.